All right, everybody. Well, welcome. My name is Ashley Barker, and along with Osni Marquez and myself, we're going to be your hosts for today's Strategies for Working Remotely panel series. Our topic today that we're focusing in on is, basically how have we responded to doing training during this period where most of us are working remotely now. So training virtualization. We have 4 panelists who are responsible for doing a lot of training for their organizations. I think they're going to have a lot of good insights for you. So how we're going to do this today, we have a series of canned questions that we're going to present to the panelists. A very small number of questions, but just a way to kind of start the conversation and get it going. As we move through the canned questions, Osni, my counterpart, will be monitoring chat, and he would like, or we would all welcome your comments as we move along. If we say something that you agree with, or you have maybe a different way that you do that at your organization, or you have some tips above and beyond what the panelists are telling us about, we highly recommend you put that in chat. We'd also love to hear in chat what you're interested in learning and getting out of this panel, as well as questions. And so once we get done with our questions, we're going to turn it over to Osni, and he's going to, kind of moderate the chat and ask the panelists your questions and give you the opportunity to unmute yourself, ask your question, and make your comments. So we want this to be interactive, very informal. We hope you get a lot out of it today, and we welcome your participation. So with that, each panelist is going to introduce themselves, and then we will get started. So first up, we have Kelly Barnes. Kelly?
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here to share some of the learnings that we've had over the last 18 months with you. As Ashley said, my name is Kelly Barnes, and I'm the Deputy Director of Instructor Training at the Carpentries, which is a nonprofit that teaches coding and data science skills to researchers that helps researchers do more effective, efficient, and reproducible research. We do this by training volunteer instructors who then go out and teach technical carpentries workshops. And a carpentries workshop is typically a short form, often a 2-day, but it can be longer, inclusive, hands-on workshop where we teach things like Git, the shell, R, and Python. Our instructors teach by demonstrating skills in real time and having learners follow along on their own computers. Now, interestingly, prior to COVID, we really, not only did we favor in-person workshops, but in fact, we actively discouraged online workshops because we just weren't sure that we could replicate that same quality. But obviously, since March 2020, we've moved all those workshops online. And so as the world begins to open up, we're looking to support both online and in-person workshops moving forward. But my area is specifically instructor training. So that's where we train our instructors in pedagogy and carpentries practices that are all grounded in educational and cognitive research. And at the start of the pandemic, we spent a lot of time learning as much as we could about teaching online from this big global community we have. So we listened to people and really, we learned from them. We collected all this wisdom and feedback through community discussions, surveys, blog posts, and discussions in our listservs and our Slack. And we use that crowdsourced wisdom to develop both a bonus module where we teach people, we train people further on teaching online. And also we've drafted a document called Recommendations for Teaching Carpentries Workshops Online. So through all of that, we've been doing a lot of thinking about teaching online, and I hope that I have some stuff that'll be useful to share. And I'm looking forward to learning from everyone else too. Thank you.
Thank you. Helen, you're next.
Oh, hi, everyone. Thanks, Ashley, for having me today. I'm looking forward to share with everyone our best practices for training. So a little bit about myself. I am an HPC consultant at NERSC Supercomputing Center in Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. I work in the user engagement group, and besides consulting, our group does user programming environment settings, trainings, documentations. I've been the user point of contact among our staff, support staff, system group, vendors for the NERSC, a few of the NERSC systems, currently the Cori system, for about 15 years. And I'm now the lead for the NERSC training programs for about 2 years now. We host about 20 events, training events per year for the 8,000 users and 800 projects. Same as everyone, our training have transitioned from small scale in-person training events to the virtual trainings starting March last year. So I've been involved in, currently our training focus on the GPU programming trainings on the perimeter system. I've been involved in the HPC community services, such as the CUG Cray user group. I've been program chair for about 2 years, and I'm on the OpenMP language committee working on the specifications. With Tim Madison, Alice Conegus, and we have published a book on the OpenMP Common Core. So I'll just introduce myself. My background is in climate science. So I think that's about it from my self-introduction.
Thanks, Helen. All right, next up we have Julia.
Oh, thanks a lot. Thanks for joining this webinar. We're happy to share our experiences. We've done a lot so far. Last 2 years, as everyone else, all our events online, and we scrambled to put it together. We did a lot of things. So my role at NVIDIA is I'm heading OpenACC and Hackathons group, and our main goal is to help people on board to accelerated data centers, really to help people to start with GPU programming and do it as fast, as seamless as possible. So we're enabling people to get going and accelerate their science. Our team is working with the community effort. So we contribute to OpenACC organization, which one of the arms is outreach, hackathons, boot camps. So we work a lot with Helen, we work a lot with Tom, who will be talking next, Ashley. So to get everyone together, to collect all the mentors, to users, to expose them to these wonderful events that we have. So far, we started these events together with Oak Ridge. The first one was at Oak Ridge together with Fernanda at that time, when Titan came along and lots of people didn't know what GPUs are and how even to work with them. Since then, we are doing now 25 events a year, right? So this year is our record event. Those events are very highly hands-on, lots of collaboration going on, and people come out of it with accelerated codes, parts of the codes that accelerate, and a lot of knowledge and lots of new connections. Over time, we had over 400 applications that went through our program, and community helps a lot. So mentors and computer resources, all the support really comes from all of us, from everyone on the call, and I'm sure there are more than who was not able to join. Members who contribute the most, at least in US and Europe, is Oak Ridge. Thanks a lot. NERSC contributing a lot as well. In Europe, we are working with Helmholtz centers and CFCS. And if you want to learn a little bit more about the events that we do, so we also have like boot camps, like smaller events. So hackathons.org is our site. And again, it's under OpenACC umbrella. And as a marketing chair of OpenACC.org, I really encourage you to check it out and see what else I do. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, and finally we have Tom.
Hey everyone, I'm Tom Papatheodore. I work as an HPC engineer at the Oak Ridge Leadership Computing Facility at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. I work in the System Acceptance and User Environments group. My role in that group is to work with users and create documentation on the early systems as we lead up to a system like Frontier. We have these early test beds that we run on, and so doing testing on these systems as well as the actual Frontier system when it arrives, and also lead the training program for those early systems and for the users on those systems. And previously, I worked as the OLCF training lead and still keep my hands in that program a bit. So all things training at OLCF, I like to keep an eye on and help out with. So yeah, as the other folks here have said, there's lots of things we've done over the last year or so to move things to online trainings, whether or not they were just webinars before or pieces with hands-on that we did in person. We've had to adapt all of those for online learning, and so hopefully we can give you some information that'll be helpful understand, what we've done, and hopefully we can learn from things that maybe some of you guys have done.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, panelists, for introducing yourselves. And for the folks listening, that was the end of our PowerPoint slides. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And now we just really want to turn this into a discussion. And so I have about 6 questions, I think, for the panelists, and then we're going to open it up and ask them your questions. So this first question is to all the panelists. So Tom, you're up first. So what are some of the strategies you have found effective for creating a positive learner experience in an online workshop? So what are some of the things that have worked well for you?
So I think, and I assume everyone would agree with this, that we have, I guess, identifying the right set of tools for the particular training is probably the biggest starting point for being successful in these online environments, right? If you have a webinar that you're doing, and maybe it's a small webinar, something like Zoom, right, like we're doing right now, is usually sufficient. It's informational, so it's not like you have to help people in a one-on-one setting. And right, you can have chat questions. We'll do the same thing here, and we can answer these questions for a small audience in just like the Zoom chat that we have going. If you have something that is more maybe like this, but larger audience, maybe more talks, that sort of thing, Zoom chat can sometimes be a bit difficult to keep up on, I guess, without getting things left behind. And so you have, maybe you need to add in something else like Slack for Q&A sessions, or even a Google Doc or something like that. And if you have, like a hands-on component, of course, then you need a way to help people. So there's certain functionality that we found, like in Zoom, right, that uses breakout rooms. And so you can use those for helping people one-on-one, or even in Slack channels, you can use a workspace like that to help people with their hands-on with code snippets, right? You can't really drop those into this sort of a chat like we have here in Zoom. You need something that can handle the formatting and that sort of stuff. So I guess that's my long-winded way of saying that, one of the most important things to me is just identifying the right tools for the particular training that you're working on.
Okay, thank you. So Kelly, you're next.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things that we've thought a lot about is, these environments, these virtual trainings, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, were kind of new for us, and we didn't have a lot of etiquette around how you participate in these virtual meetings. So I think even now, 18 months later, it's still really useful to teach your learners, teach your participants how you want them to participate successfully. So from the very beginning, how do you want people to raise their hand, for example? In Zoom, there's probably 4 or 5 different ways to raise your hand. So how do we want people to do that? How do we want them to ask questions? Those sorts of things, because if there's too many options, someone might just decide to stay quiet. Something else we've thought a lot about is remembering that people are often joining from home now, and thinking about the fact that home looks really different for a lot of different people. So I know early on for me, I was, we all know it's much harder when people have their cameras off to feel engaged and to know if people are following along. And so early on, I was like, oh, how do we encourage people to turn their cameras on? But someone reminded me that when you're asking someone to turn their camera on, they're inviting all of us into their home, and that's not going to be comfortable for everybody. And so I think we really need to be respectful when we think about if we're going to ask people to turn cameras on, for example. A few other just little tidbits. There's this kind of like what Tom was just saying around, you need to have a tool for different size groups. There was this tendency where we were like, oh, we're doing these trainings online now. We can open it up to everybody. But we've really encouraged people to still keep it small if you want to have those interactions, because it is so hard to know if people are following along and to answer questions. So keep it small, go slower than you think you're going to need to, like much slower even than in person. and be flexible, because things, technology breaks, different things happen. And so those are some of the big things that we've been thinking about when trying to create the positive learner environment.
Thank you, Kelly. All right, so next we have Helen.
So I would like to talk about the considerations when you organize virtual events. In the past, people come on site, and so our training events are usually 4-day and contiguous days. Now that everything is virtual, we in order to accommodate different time zones, Zoom fatigue, we find out doing multi-part training series is very effective. The shorter days, and it also helps people can do something else during the training days, on the training days. Also, we find out that having some dark days even apart from, we have part 1, part 2 with some days apart. And then people can try to absorb knowledge and do some hands-on, get questions answered. So we're doing lots of multi-part training now. For example, one of the 4-day training events, like the Deep Learning for Science School, turned into a weekly seminar for about 3 months. And we have lots of CUDA, OpenACC, OpenMP, those complicated topics. We find out that multi-day events with experts offline Slack really helped a lot. I have two other comments to make. So effective communications for Q&A. Tom mentioned about Slack, Google Doc, Zoom. We like to usually using Slack plus Google Doc instead of Zoom chat because it's recorded, it's threaded, interleaved. But one other thing I really want to mention, the benefits, huge benefits with Slack channel is we set up an organizer channel before the real event. Organizers have real-time collaborations, planning, hands-on, coding, everything, and it happens before and during the event, besides the general user invited shortly before the event. Another thing I want to mention is we publish professional closed captions with virtual trainings, and also to improve accessibility. We publish professional quality closed captions after the training, but also during the training we turn on the subtitles and also enable full transcript so people can download them as well. I think this helps the virtual training especially. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, and last but not least, Julia.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So I think for us, online events actually open up a lot of opportunities, and we didn't really expect that it's going to be that way before it all started. It also has a lot of limitation that we need to adapt to and play with it and test a lot of things. So what we learned, for example, for online events, it was very easy for us to find a lot of people who can attend because they don't need to travel, and they can just sit at their desk and do whatever they need to do and be there. Mentors don't need to travel, so more mentors can attend. We now have events with people from different time zones and under one umbrella, and everyone is happy, and it all can be accommodated, right? You just need to test it, to play with it, and figure out what's the best way to do it. But at the same time, it also requires a lot of coordination, way more than face-to-face event. And it also was not expected, right? So we need to do a lot of testing. People were mentioning about the tools. But it also requires a lot of touch points with attendees. We need to set right expectations. Like, how much time does it take? Do they really need to pay attention all the time? How do they need to prepare? You need to follow up with them every single time because they are in their comfort zone. They are not right in the room or next to you where you control what to do, really, the majority of the time at least, right? So you have to really notify them, remind them, set expectation right. And another element that is lacking in the online environment is all the people interactions, all the socializing that we were so easily able to do when we were doing it face to face. So we had to improvise. And without that element, events really are not lively and not that productive to anyone. So we do have, for all our events, we encourage teamwork. And for some events, it's just required. So they have to be in the teamwork. They have to discuss together. Mentors are coming into breakout rooms all the time. And that way they can ask questions and answer questions and get the answers right away, right? We encourage that collaborations, communications, because when we're sitting in these webinars, right now, we don't see a lot of questions coming in. It's really hard when there are a lot of people watching you to really ask anything. And when you're in a small breakout room with people you are comfortable with, it's much easier to open up. So more collaborations, more interactions, more checking in, more planning, and things really work well. So we're really excited about what came out of all of this. So we learned a lot and got better.
Thank you very much. So we're going to move to the next question, but for the audience, I would love to see in chat, if you're willing to put it there, some of the tips that you have that we didn't hit upon. And so share maybe your best practices for some of the things that you have found that make your virtual training and workshops more successful. All right, and while we're doing that, let's move on to the next question. So this question is for Kelly. So Kelly, you mentioned earlier that you all did a lot of hands-on, live coding in your training. So can you tell us, for the audience, like what do you consider to be live coding? What is it?
Yeah, live coding is kind of the bread and butter of carpentries workshops. In the carpentries, instructors never use slides when they're teaching coding. In person, they would plug their laptops into a projector and they would work through the lesson material by typing in the code, reformatting the data, and basically talking through what they're doing. And we really encourage workshop participants to follow along. They're really encouraged to code along on their own machines. It's really important to us that learners are all set up on their own machines, like that they have all the software installed and they know how to use it, because we usually only have maybe 2 days with them, and you can only teach so much in 2 days. So our goal is really to give people the tools to keep learning after. So basically, it's all of our workshops are these kind of code along format.
All right. So I suspect that's a little harder to do when we're not all together in a room where you control the screen size and what people can see and how they can see it. So how have you adapted to make this live coding work in your virtual workshops, virtual training? And that question is for Kelly.
Yeah. Some parts of it adapted really easily because you can use screen share on Zoom. And in fact, it's easier to see the screen on Zoom than it might be if you're in the back of a room somewhere. But there are a lot of challenges. One of the big ones is screen real estate. So if you're thinking about, when I teach, I have at least 2 big screens, right? I don't know about you guys, but if you have a good home setup, you might have a couple of screens. And you got to understand, though, that some of your learners might be on one little laptop screen, or they might be, some people are even on, I guess not for live coding, they're not on a tablet, but they're on these much smaller screens. So thinking about how do we have the Zoom window up and the chat, and we really rely heavily on collaborative note-taking documents. So you've got that up. And then you want them to be watching the person's screen as they're typing, but they also need to have their own coding environment open. That is a lot of stuff. So screen real estate is huge, and it's really helpful to help learners know what the best way to set up their screen is at the beginning, and also try to minimize switching between those windows. And if you are going to switch, make sure you pause and give people a chance to get to where you are. It's also really hard to know if people are following along, if they're lost, or if they have questions. One of the other hallmarks to carpenters workshops is that we use these sticky notes, like a Post-it note. At the beginning of an in-person workshop, we give learners both a red and a green, or more often it's a yellow and blue because of accessibility, sticky note. And they're encouraged to put the green one up on their laptop if they're following along and tracking. And if they run into trouble, they can put the red one up. And that way it's a much more subtle way to signal, hey, I need help, and someone can come and walk around. So in Zoom, you can kind of do that with reactions. You have the green check and the red X. We also use a lot of formative assessments, so little short exercises. And this is where we'll use maybe the collaborative note-taking document to make sure people are following along. And another big key is having helpers. We have these in person too, but they're really important online. Helpers are people who know the material, who can monitor the chat for questions. They can also pull someone into a breakout room to troubleshoot if they need to do that. So I think, there's a lot of challenges with online live coding, but I think there are definitely some ways to do that successfully.
Sorry, I was on mute. There were fire alarms, of course, but they're gone now. So Julia, you also mentioned that in the hackathons there is a lot of real live coding going on. So have you found anything in particular to help that when you're doing this virtually instead of sitting beside each other?
Yeah, then as Kelly said, that it's actually sometimes easier online because you can just share your screen on Zoom and you can comment on top of the screen and multiple people can share at the same time. And you can make it as big as you want, depends on the real estate in your possession. And when we did events in person, we had to worry about like, okay, do we have enough screens? Can we bring it? How to bring it? Where to store them? How it works? So it was very cumbersome, really. And not very comfortable really to sit behind the table for the whole day on the chairs that brought in there. So we had some mixed feedback about this. Some people were not really into it. And it's actually more comfortable for people to do it from home. And another option was because you're sitting at home, you actually control your environment. So it's not loud as if you were in the room that's right behind me right now. So again, it depends what you like better. Sometimes the quiet and comfort of your house is actually more productive. And we also encourage people to work in the teams, right? And this is when we want them. So their live coding is done only within the teams. And we encourage them to say, if anyone has a question or anything, first ask your team member, share your screen, go through all the details. And it really helps a lot. And we always have mentors and TAs coming in constantly to figure out. Sometimes for hackathons, mentors actually stay in the room all time for the whole day, right, to help out. So the more communications, the more encouragement, the more reminding, the more like over communicating even, the better results are.
Awesome. Side note, I remember that first hackathon we did where we carted like 20 monitors to the event. Yeah, that is definitely an improvement to do that virtually, because I think we broke about 7 of them in the process. So,
oh my God.
So, all right. So I would just want to throw it back to the folks who are joining us. Again, if you have anything that you've found that works really well when people are doing live coding, or trying to teach something that's show and do, we would love to hear your comments in the chat about that as well. So we're going to move on to the next question. This is for Helen and Tom. So Helen, we'll start with you. So as you've moved, you both said that you have done, prior to this, you did a lot of in-person events. Have you realized any benefits? I think we've heard a couple already, but have you realized any benefits from moving your events to virtual versus being in person? And Helen, we'll start with you.
Yes, we have found lots of virtual training advantages. One of them is a larger capacity for training. One such example is at each summer program starts, we have in-person typical trainings for interns, introduction to those resources, and the crash course for supercomputing. And this year we were able to open it up to everybody new to the user, new to our center and new to supercomputing. So we had like over 200 attendees for each of them. As before, we were like limited with the in-person room size, maybe 30 or 40 of it. Another benefit is no added admin cost for physical meeting planning, site access approvals, food ordering, and users don't have to travel. Also allows us to do shorter training days, and people can do some work outside of the training events if they're not traveling anymore. And we can easily do so for sometimes like 1-hour webinars. We don't have to have people traveling just for those shorter events. Very easy to get experts, like the hackathons Julia has mentioned. People can just come and present a talk or be online to do some offline help. One biggest benefits happened since last year for us is we start to do collaborating training events. So now our staff peers we are remote at our own sites, and we were able to collaborate on one such event, and then with one set of presentation, but multiple sets of hands-ons and study materials. So that's since we we usually have lots of common topics for the training needs. So this helps us to reduce the staff work, but also has the more reaching for center for our users from different centers. For these, we also have been collaborating with, for example, collaborating with Oak Ridge, Argonne, ECP in past year, and also work with our vendors like NVIDIA, HPE, and developers for the tools. So this is due to all these benefits, our attendees jump really high for virtual trainings. I think this is great that training can reach out to more people.
Thank you. Tom, do you have anything to add?
Well, I mean, Helen has touched on a lot of points that are, benefits that have come out of this. I would certainly echo what she said, and Julia has already mentioned about, being able to bring in experts, whether it's mentors at a hackathon or it's just someone at another facility. You can really, it really beefs up your collaboration, right? Because, people don't have to travel, and so it opens you up to be able to help, but not put in a time commitment of, a full week versus the few hours a day that you need help with. And, if there's like a 1 hour training or something like that, I'm not going to ask Helen to come out and, participate in that in person, right? She could instead just jump right on the webinar and move forward with that. So I feel like in some ways it really helps with collaboration. And I guess how it will help going forward, and what I feel, what I'm sort of responding to William's question in chat too, about, whether or not this is reaching a tipping point where things will be hybrid in the future, right? When we did some of these trainings in the past, we did sometimes have an online component, right? So for similar reasons that I just mentioned is, we're also not going to ask users to come to Oak Ridge, since a lot of our users are remote. We're not going to ask them to come for a 1 hour training, right? So we would have the folks who are on site attend on site, and the folks who were remote or users, they would attend virtually, and not intentionally, but I feel like they never really got as good of attention as the folks that were there in person, right? You could just walk up and help. And I feel like now, I mean, we're really doing everything virtually and have adapted in the ways we've talked about already to be able to, really help these folks. And so I feel like in the future, if/when we end up doing these things in person again, we'll be much better prepared to be able to help these folks online. And it sounds like we're all sort of wanting to do that too, right? I know that Kelly mentioned in the future, right, that they plan on doing these things, both having components that are online and in person. So, I really feel like we'll be better suited, better able to take those folks online and give them a better experience. So something that I can see is better. I guess one more thing I would mention is, when we did things in person before also, we would take training tokens, right? So we have these training tokens. You could have access to Summit, for instance, for that block of 2 hours, and that was it. And then at the end, we have to collect your tokens and bring them back to where now, and also something that we were doing anyways before was we have this Ascent training system, and we're able to give folks accounts on that system by joining a temporary project or something, right? So because of that, we give people access to the system for longer periods of time. So you can do things like have a training start on a Monday and then have a second day on a Wednesday, give people that time in between or potentially afterward to go and finish up on their own, because, maybe not everybody's good at under pressure, right? You have 2 hours, get this done. They like to take their time and absorb it at night when they work on it or something like that. So we're able to give them that as well. And that's, across the board with hands-on trainings, be it just a tutorial or a hackathon or what it is. So it's also something that's we've learned from and is a benefit.
Thank you. So we've sort of tiptoed around this next question, but I'll still go ahead and ask it. And again, this is to Kelly and Tom. So Kelly, is an online format of an event as effective as an in-person event? Where do you stand?
I think it can be. I think it's really important that we learn how to adapt, as we all have been, right? We can't do everything exactly the same as in person. And as many of us have alluded to, the biggest challenge is that social interaction. It's so much easier to make connections and ask questions and get help in person. And I still think we do have a lot to learn about how we can do that better. And I think the tools we use, there's a long way they could go to making it easier too. And I think both formats have really strong positives and negatives. I think honestly though, moving training online, just the fact that it's made it so accessible to so many people who haven't had the opportunities means that ultimately it is really worth it. And I do want to say one other thing about this idea of hybrid trainings. I think they probably are, to some extent, the way of the future. I think we need to be really cautious though, that we don't end up creating two tiers. I think I could see potentially an equity issue where the people who can't afford to travel or who, can't leave their house for, accessibility reasons end up getting a less good experience. And I think we really need to think about how we can do that better. Kind of like what Tom was saying about, we know how to serve people online better. And I think that that's going to be really important moving forward from an equity standpoint.
Thank you. Tom, I know you sort of answered that question before, but do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I would just say, well, first that I agree with what Kelly was just saying, right? That it can be, it depends on the format, right? I mean, if you have a webinar or something like that, where it's just informational and maybe it's an hour long or whatever, really no reason that you can't watch it on your screen instead of being there in person. It's informational. Now, there is something to be said about different people's learning, right? Maybe different people learn in different ways. And when you're sitting in a chair in a room by yourself, it's different than if you're sitting there with a whole group of people who are all focused on one thing. So there's that. But otherwise, those informational sessions, I think, are very similar. They're able to be just as effective. The hands-on, I feel like we've really made it as close as we can, right, to being in person, except what she said. And you're certainly missing the social aspect, right? Whether that's, you're a graduate student, you're networking, right? Maybe you meet somebody and that ends up turning into a job opportunity or something, as well as just being there and being, I don't know, being able to talk to people where you get coffee or something like that. And that's something that Julia's mentioned too, is like a missing component. I feel like we've really done a great job with the hackathons at getting them like as close as you can to being like the in-person events when it comes to the breakout rooms. You can work together by yourself, like as if you're at a table, you have Slack, and so you're able to work across the room, right, where you can still communicate with people outside of your own group. But yeah, that talking and being able to like, hang out and have dinner or something is missing. And like Kelly said, that's something that all the other things we're able to sort of work on. And that's the one piece I feel like everybody's just kind of still trying to figure out how to improve that.
Thank you. So to that point, when this panel met to prep for this event, that was the one thing that we really identified as a missing link. And so for our folks that are on the phone, if you have found anything in your own experiences where you have been able to closer get to that, building that community, that social interaction, helping people network with each other, we would love to hear that. And you can type that in chat, or when we get to the Q&A, unmute yourself and speak to that. So I do have one final question, and then for the panelists, and then we're going to open it up. I see we've gotten a couple of questions in chat, so we'll open it up as well as to just general comments. So the last question I have is for Julia and Helen. So Julia, is there anything else in terms of online events that you want to maybe introduce? And do you think online events are here to stay?
Yeah, thanks. And I guess lots of people were already covering points of this question, and looks like there is a lot of positivity in the air that actually do work, and we do want them to stay in some one way or another. And on our part, online events forced us to change format a little bit. We cut the time, we spread it out a little bit. So it's slightly different. And now going forward, what we plan to do, we plan to have half of the event of the hackathon always be online, no matter what reality is going to be going forward. And another part is going to be face-to-face, if it's appropriate for whatever time and money available for people. So we're always going to keep at least one part of the event always going to be online. And we're still trying to figure out how we can do online plus face-to-face at the same room, how technology is going to keep up with it or not, because before COVID was there, I don't think equipment was at the place when we were able to really have microphones everywhere and screens everywhere and the good quality. So online attendees actually can hear everything clearly and participate with what is happening in the room. But when this comes there, we're totally going to introduce that part. But for now, we could just separate the event into two pieces, and we'll always keep the online part alive.
Makes sense. Helen, how about yourself?
So we realized that remote training worked better than expected. With earlier days, we definitely have lots of doubts, especially for hands-on component. And with our smaller size sessions for the hands-on compared to the webinars or just the presentations, we were able to allow users to unmute themselves, and we use Slack messages and threaded messages, and things have been working quite well for the hands-on as well. So also with lots of other advantages I mentioned, everybody has mentioned, I think in the future, NERSC would probably offer more remote training than in-person ones. We could have some remote-only events and some hybrid events, and we could arrange the in-person rooms for local people and for anyone who wants to travel to come on site. Especially people probably, when there are large components for hands-on, people would have to come with the quick help, in-person help. So we could manage that. I think Julia definitely mentioned one considerations that what about the conference room video audio setup? Now with virtual, everyone has their own laptop and people can hear well, but in a large conference room, if people are not connected, the in-person people, when they talk, remote people really cannot see well. One thing I could think of is with the captions would probably help. Still don't know how, if that person is still not talking to the maybe when whoever wants to talk, this person has to use a virtual login to talk, then it'll be captured well, and the captions will also appear on the screen. There's some consideration for that. I think ongoing, we're definitely to do more collaborations. It's really worked so well with all these people's help, our peers, vendors, developers, tools developers, everyone, and local staff help as well. Really, really good And we'll continue with shorter and multi-day events. Even if we do mostly remote plus hybrid, but if at some event has to be in person, we probably will need to do a longer day, but I don't see many of those pure in-person events as of now, thinking about it. And we'll continue some of the webinar events will be totally remote, I believe. So I would say the answer to the online events here to stay, I think most likely yes.
Okay. So it sounds like, so thank you panelists first, that's the kind of the end of our planned questions. So it sounds like, kind of hybrid events is what a lot of folks are thinking about moving to. And I'm just curious, again, this is just if you'll put this in the chat window within Zoom, maybe what are some of the factors for the audience that would sway you to either go in person or stay virtual? I was thinking when Helen was talking, I've been to a few of their workshops, but it's a day of travel for me to get from Tennessee to California. And then it's so expensive to stay in the Bay Area or find a hotel. And so, for me, if it was going to California, I would probably, maybe do it virtual, but if it's close by, maybe I would choose to do it in person. So I am curious from the audience, what are some of the considerations that you personally would weigh when determining if you wanted to do an in-person or virtual event? But outside of that, what we would like to do now, we have some questions in chat, and so I'm going to turn it over to Osni, and basically he's going to kind of start asking the panelists your questions, but he's also going to give you the opportunity to unmute yourself and ask your question if you want to. And then also you can use the raise your hand functionality within chat. If you have a question or a comment that you want to make and you don't want to type it in chat, that is absolutely okay too. So Osni, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ashley. And actually, I'm going to follow the order here where the comments or the questions came in. And the first comment, Lina, if you'd like to kind of translate that comment into a question, I think, Lina, you could unmute yourself.
Yes, hey, thank you, Asmi, and thank you for all the panelists and attendees. I'm learning a lot as we go. I typed it early when Ashley encouraged us to type, so I think parts of this have been addressed, but I think my never-ending quest for ideas, and I love to learn how people address it, is how do we kind of get the feedback from our attendees in? And I think Los Alamos is particularly challenging because most of us are not allowed to use webcams, and there's no culture of using webcams, so we almost never see our participants, and it's just, and everybody is muted because it's part of the culture, right? So those awkward moments when somebody makes a joke and there's this dead silence and you're just hoping that everybody's muted, but people are reacting, you know, but looking for that ways to get that feedback is, I'm sorry, I'm not formulating it very well, but I think you guys know what I'm talking about. And I think some of this has been addressed already, but if anybody has any ideas, I'm pretty much, I think it's a constant quest of trying new things and seeing what works for other people.
So Helen, it looks like you'd like to say something.
Yeah, I could address from my point of view. I think it is totally agree with it is really hard to get feedback. A few of things we could think of are the reactions and annotations in Zoom. We could annotate. And one of the things I found another event used was ask people to put star different colors to say if you agree with this or you are, you know, at this point, put if say people are doing hands-on, you want to know their progress. So if you're done, put a green, you know, sticker on this corner, the left side, left bottom corner, or if you're having issues, put a red sticker on the other side. So it's very easy to see the distribution or the percentage of done. The other thing I think is prepare a few Zoom poll questions. So you could poll and people when they answer your question or do the poll, you know the progress as well. And one other thing I could think of is encourage people to put up a picture if they cannot turn on their camera. When you see lots of pictures, the presenters still have a better feeling of talking. Instead of talking to blank screens, you are talking to people's pictures and closer to real environment.
So Julia, you would like to add something?
Yeah, I think Osni. So just a quick, like Helen already mentioned, really lots of tools available that can make our life easier in the virtual world. But the part that we also do in addition to everything that Helen mentioned, we also divide people into teams, doesn't matter what kind of event it is, and we send them out to breakout rooms. And we always go and check and talk to them and see how they're doing. So poll is great. We can check who they are and what is happening, but you can't really know like what their feelings they are for real, like I'm struggling, are they happy? So that's personal communications, I think, is inevitable part that we would like to keep no matter where we're at.
Finally, Tom, I think would like to add something to it.
Yeah, so I would just, I guess, add to those comments to say that the polling, right, is something that's useful sort of generally, right? Just kind of what I think Julie was pointing at, right? It's not necessarily going to tell you a specific person's overall feeling of how things are going, but you can get a feel for a room. And it's nice because it's not anonymous in the sense that you can usually see people's hands up or like giving a thumbs up or something. There are some that are, right? I actually can't recall any of the names of these tools, but I know I haven't used them, but I've seen other people use them where it's just something where they give you a link, right? And you're able to go and add your whatever you want to say in your answer to their question or typing in where you're from, right? And maybe it'll populate like a little map that shows sort of where everybody's at and that sort of thing. And, you know, those are nice because some of the anonymous parts are helpful because, you know, you could ask people even sitting in a room with 10 people, hey, how's it going? Some people might look down, right? Somebody might answer you, but, you know, it's just everybody's different. So you can really get a decent feel, I think, for how something's going with those polls or just to get an understanding. Something else I was going to say related to what Helen said, but it escapes me at the moment. But yeah, I think those tools are nice for those reasons. Oh, right. Actually, it was related to what Julia said. And it's that I just don't think anything can beat, be it in person or, you know, virtually going around a room and just sort of stopping in and checking in on people, you know, telling people, especially if you're in Slack, hey, you know, if you want to ask a question, feel free to IM me directly because you might not want to ask questions in front of everybody, even though it's virtual. So, you know, giving people different options, I think is helpful for getting feedback. And, you know, just individually poking at people to say, hey, how's it going?
Well, it seems this, yeah, all panelists got, yes, Kelly.
Yeah, I think we've had so much luck with collaborative note-taking documents. And again, this is something that I think only works well up to a certain number of people. But for our workshops, we use Google Docs or an Etherpad where everyone can be typing at once. So you can create prompts. You can, you know, have a question. And one of the things that we found is if you copy and paste everyone's names under the question, then everyone has a spot to type. And so you can kind of go through and see what people are saying. And you can pick a few out to verbalize, or you can have them verbalize them, but everyone else can see what people are typing too. And it amazes me how much more collaborative and more like a community it can feel if you're in this note-taking document together and you can see what everyone's saying. So that's been really, really great for us.
Okay, so let's move to the next question here. William, I would like to unmute and ask directly to the panelists. Well, let me ask the question. Let's see. Do you think we have reached the tipping point that future training events after pandemic will be hybrid, say simultaneously on site and broadcast one? Who would like to take that one? Tom?
I mean, I guess we've really already answered that question with one of the questions we asked. I think that you know, we'll continue to do these in a hybrid way moving forward. Maybe some are online only, maybe some are hybrid. I might point to a question slightly further down that is related to the hybrid workspace. Let's see.
We'll get there, I think.
Okay, fair enough.
So let's move to the next one here for the sake of time. Kathleen, would you like to ask directly by unmuting?
Yes, did you call for Kathleen?
Yes, please go.
Yes. You know, I look at this delivery as just another type of modality. It's just another modality. We can do all kinds of really slick things to prepare for delivering. For example, Kelly, you know, you can teach code by capturing some code, recording like using Captivate, and have those posted in the chat for people to look at and see what's wrong with this code or what's right with this code or how could this code be better. And so to do those kinds of things, though, I think it takes a lot of planning, and it still takes an instructional designer I'm curious, out of all of you who use this modality, how often do you deploy the craft of an instructional designer to create your solutions?
So would like to take this one. Kelly, yes.
I was looking for the little hand button, but I lost it. So we don't hire official, like formal instructional design people, but one of the things that the Carpentries Workshops uses is a very collaborative curriculum. So our curriculum is all, it's all open source, it's all available, and people can constantly be, putting pull requests in and making changes. And so we really try to be really collaborative about it. And we also have people who are curriculum advisors who are subject matter experts. But I do think you're right in that there is a lot of room for people who are experts in instructional design. And I mean, we have a little bit of that sort of informally, but we have not used formal instructional design people.
Yeah, this is no different than any other, than any other training solution. I would encourage you all to consider that. It's just good stuff. It's solid systematic approach. So, but thank you very much for your delivery today and for inviting us. Thank you.
All right, next question here. Luan, would like to ask directly to the speakers, to the panelists rather.
Yeah, hi, thank you so much for this. I think when, even just looking at work going forward, we're going to see a hybrid environment. I know in our workplace, we are going to have people 100% telecommuting, 100% on-site, and people in between. It's about a third, a third, a third. I know previously, because we have people that have worked in different places for meetings, when you have somebody on the phone or even our attempts at meetings, it's been really uneven and we forget about the people that are online. And I know that we're going to be doing this more with training as well. And so I guess I was very taken by Helen's comment about etiquette, because I find that that's been exceptionally true. And Julia's comment about planning and collaborations, interactions, all of you have said that. But I think hybrid's brand new. I mean, I think we all kind of jumped to virtual, but I don't think hybrid is virtual. I think hybrid is hybrid. And so I guess I would just be interested in any perspective on how hybrid might work, because it's not online, or it's not virtual, and it's not in person. And how can we be inclusive so that we're not keeping people out of the loop?
So Tom.
Yeah, so this is what I was going to comment on
Right.
a few minutes ago regarding the hybrid talking. It is something that happens even though you've been working. When everybody's remote, right? And so everybody's looking at their own screen and looking at the questions and being able to mute or unmute. But as soon as you start putting some people in a room and some people online, you do all of a sudden have that issue again, just like I was mentioning before about how we sort of unintentionally didn't give as good of support to the folks who were online. So something related, my group here at OLCF, we recently participated in a pilot program for just this thing with our group, not training, right? But the idea was some of us stayed home and some of us went into the office some number of days a week, right? And so it is different than everybody being there or everybody being at home, because you had people in a conference room and you're all sitting there talking, and you have people who are remote, right? But it does sort of leave those people out a little bit if you don't have some expectation for etiquette, right? And so, something that we tried to do is make sure that everybody had their Zoom meeting up in front of them, right? To where you could still ask questions in chat and, answer them that way. There are like social cues, right? To bring somebody in on a conversation. I lean in, I want to say something while I'm sitting at a table, I'm about to say something. And so you might be more apt to call on me than just having to think, Okay, what about the guy who's not here? We'll call on him last, right? And there is more to be thought of in this way, right? Because that is a piece that's new outside of, we could say, hey, we've been doing this for a year already, but everybody's remote. And when you start to bring people back together, it is something that needs to be thought about and something that maybe we don't necessarily have the right answers to yet. It's something we still need to kind of figure out. I would also be curious to hear what other people have to say about that, Llewellyn.
Oh, all right. Oh, Julia, you have something.
Well, I can quickly add that we were debating how we can keep the people participating online completely in our long hackathons, like short boot camps. We really want to make them all online and it's easier to handle it. But the longer is when it goes over 2 weeks and like multiple days and they collaborate how we're going to do it. And we're right now, as you're all puzzled, how can we do it productively? And that's why we wanted to start safe and do this one part 100% online and one part 100% face-to-face. And then as we converge in it, maybe something emerges into being truly hybrid event going forward. But for now, we're not ready to try it out.
Thank you. Oh, Helen, just for the sake of time, I'd like to go to the next question, all right?
Okay.
Okay, Charles, would you please, if you'd like.
Yeah, I was just curious. I think Helen had mentioned about breaking up things into small increments, but didn't specify, like, is there a max amount of, we shouldn't exceed more than a 2-hour block, 3-hour block in order to keep people engaged and then spread them out over a course? Like, is there a recommended approach besides spread it out and break it down? Like, is there something more specific, I guess is what I'm wondering.
Would you like to take that one now, Helen? Or Julia?
If we do, I think I was like, when we planning for the shorter days, we basically in that between 2 hours to maybe up to 4 hours a day-ish, like half day for some people, and otherwise we could run into lunch break or whatever break. And I have been attending some of the conferences, though they're different. Like this week, we're doing 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. for the whole week. But I think for the trainings, for the virtual training multi-day events, we should probably limit as like 4 hours. I know for the hands-on, for the hackathons, it's a little also different as well. People are doing 4 days because people are free to come and go. But for the training events, the people are more focused on attending each of the sessions. Half of the day is probably good that people can also do something else and not to have too much Zoom fatigue.
Hey, Julia.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I want to echo a few things that Helen already said and maybe add a couple of what we learned. So we do 2 types of events. So one event's usually like 1 day or 2 days, and it's more instructor-led materials plus a little bit of challenge at the end. So we call them boot camps. And for these events, we learned that having a 4 hours increments are better than having 8 hours. It's good because people are less tired, and it's easier to be concentrated because they always have to pay attention to what the instructor going to be saying and what next steps are. But at the same time, you also have to sacrifice because the second day, when you do another 4 hours, not everyone going to show up, even if they really participated in that and really wanted to do it. So you really have to drive them back. So every time you separate into multiple days and they're not 100% committed, you're gonna lose a lot of people, right? So you have to know what you're against. So you kind of need to juggle those 2 things. And when we do hackathons, when people bring their codes and we assign mentors and work through it. So we did not cut any time during the day. We cut the amount of days they have to be in Zoom, but they do stay the whole day together with mentors. And if they need to take breaks, they just agree with everyone in the group. They take breaks and they come back to main presentations and or updates when we have during events.
All right, so another question here. Julia, there is another Julia.
Julia, me, Julia? Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
you, Julia, yes, please.
I'm interested to learn more about if any of you have experimented with blending like static and dynamic content. So by that, I mean like static content being like pre-recorded video segments or like homework assignments that you just, send out digitized comments to the people that you're training versus like hands-on sessions, right? Live hands-on sessions. And if you've experimented with that kind of approach, how did that work out?
Oh, right, now Julia, yes, now the other Julia.
Yeah, so from our experience, homework is really hard. So even for people who committed to come to the event and contribute like all possible time to do something ahead of the event is a real big struggle. So we do give them all possible information and follow up and do all of this, but if it's not requirement for them to show up at the event, probability that they're going to finish it's quite low in our case at least. So what we do instead, we just allocate a separate time during our hackathon. For example, we just do breakout room and we have a tutorial in that breakout room for people who want to learn more about certain topics. Because when they're already at the event, they realize that this is really important for them to know, and they actually do come to that tutorial and they do ask questions, and there is more interactions going on. But at the same time, we do send them recordings in case they do look into it, but probability is going to happen in our experience is quite low.
Any other comments here? Any further questions from the participants? I think we have gone through all of them, or further comments from the panelists.
So I have one more question, since there's no user questions, and looks like we have about 8 minutes left. So maybe this will be the final one. I'm curious if any of you have used, I've done some training and workshops where we have a 2-hour tutorial and then there's a office hours later in the day and the next day to help complete the homework assignments, and then you do it again. Have any of you utilized these kind of office hour events, I guess you would say, and have you found them to be effective? Do people actually come to the office hours? Kelly?
Yeah, we don't use office hours per se, but one thing we do, I mentioned earlier that it's really important that we have everyone walk away with the software set up on their machine so they can keep using it. And installation problems are one of the biggest hassles, especially online. So a lot of times our instructors will hold what they call like an installation party prior to the workshop to make sure everyone gets things set up correctly. And that's been really, really helpful.
Tom?
Yeah, yes, please.
Sorry, Asni.
Yeah, so we do something, oh, sorry, were we supposed to ask someone else ask me? Yeah, so we have a session that we do where we've given it a few different times to people, and it's basically ahead of time, we have people get access to our training system, Ascent, and it's very similar to Summit. And then we give a presentation. It's basically meant for new HPC users, right? Maybe you're at SC and you use a cluster. Maybe some people don't use a cluster already. And so it has sort of a wide range of topics, right? Well, we discuss who we are at the OLCF first, and then we talk about just HPC topics in general, batch schedulers, right? Job launchers, that sort of stuff. And then talk about how people actually program for these supercomputers, right? The different languages and programming models, that sort of stuff. And then we give people the opportunity afterward where it's sort of this, I guess, static assignments, right? Where there's a bunch of just tutorials that are self-guided tutorials, and you don't really need to do them in any order. So it's really a choose your own adventure, right? Where we give you these presentations, we tell you some things you want to learn now that you might need to know about, and now go and use the challenge problems to kind of learn a little bit more about the pieces that you're interested in. And I do find that to be something that's effective, it's sort of like the office hours, right? To where you let them just sort of go, and we're there, and there's several of us on Slack that are available to sort of help them answer questions they might have along the way, or just ask general questions of us, maybe in the Zoom, to where, I don't know, they ask questions ranging from, what do you think is the future of this programming model, to, what is your path that led you to your role, right? And it really helps us sort of engage with people that way. But it's a neat idea. I will stop there, let other people answer, but I'll drop a link to it if anybody's interested in what those challenge problems look like in the chat.
Helen?
Yeah, so yes, for some of our events, especially with hands-on component, we have arranged office hours. One thing I think is helpful is that we don't do just office hours. We do the first part as hands-on walkthrough. So people are stuck it, they'll come, and then I think it'll have more people just coming or stay for office hours for specific questions. And we also advertise hands-on with bring your own code. So when people are working on their own code, they may end up with more questions, and the one-on-one office hours, screen sharing, everything works better than Slack.
Hey, Julia, would you like to add something?
Sure. So our events usually kind of integrate office hours inside it, because we have mentors always coming in and asking questions, and we usually iterate the most popular questions in front of the whole big group. So for events that we do, we don't actually have specific office hours, because we try to keep it all together and answer as much as possible at the event. But we do have office hours that we do like twice a year or something. We just schedule a webinar. We have breakout rooms, and we have a set of experts. So we have in the main room people, just if they want to stay and listen to answering like general questions, they stay there. And if they want to talk one-on-one with an expert, they go to the breakout room and they just dive deeper in their specific questions and can ask whatever they need to ask. So we have slightly different approach too, but in some way we also have office hours.
Awesome. Well, I think we are 2 minutes away from time, so I think I'll cut us off there. I want to say thank you to our 4 panelists. You all did a great job today. I really appreciate you taking the time to share your experiences. I want to thank Osni for helping to moderate the chat. And then finally, all good rides end in a survey. And so I'll just say that I will be sending you all within the next day or so. It's a very short, like I think it's 5-question survey. But we would really appreciate your feedback. And in particular, we are looking for topics that would be of interest to you around this whole notion of working remotely. And so I invite you to check out what we've done thus far. And if you have other suggestions for topics you'd like us to dive into, we would love to hear those. So I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks again. And we are officially adjourned. Thank you.